Alrighty. Give me the Tablecraft beat. So. Yeah, exactly. Alrighty. Welcome back. My name is Rafa. Welcome to a second edition of the Lunch with the Devs podcast, where we talk about the development of Tablecraft and everything surrounding it.
I'm Guillaume. I am also here for a podcast.
So, it's been roughly 2 weeks or so since we did the first one. We got a lot of positive feedback on the previous podcast unexpectedly.
So when we went into it, we didn't have the strongest plan.
It's pretty much random. We recorded it with a little headphone microphone that I was holding taut in my hands in front of the two of us, sort of awkwardly on a couch. By the end, my arm was super sore. Yeah. But what was sort of surprising was that it was effective in not just communicating about Tablecraft to people who are interested in Tablecraft, but also my mom was happy to hear about what I was up to. My mom doesn't speak English, so she doesn't understand what I'm saying right now. We have a lot to talk about today. I just want to give a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about. Obviously, we're going to be commenting on probably the biggest news. Yeah, the biggest news in the VR world right now, Oculus Quest, and what our thoughts are on that. We're going to be talking about
more of what we learned about SBIR.
Yeah, more SBIR stuff, and towards the end we'll go into the things that we've done in the game for this past 2 weeks and the things that we'll do in the weeks to come.
Yeah, the fun part.
Yeah. So, let's jump right into it.
Into the speculation?
Yeah, let's jump right into the speculation. I want to know, Oculus Quest, is it going to be like the Super Nintendo of VR?
So that is your phrase.
That is my phrase.
You can't just ask me, do I agree?
Do you agree with
the thing that you are speculating? I guess you can. You can ask me that. I don't really think so. To be totally honest, I think
I honestly don't know anything about the Super Nintendo. I wasn't even born back then, And I grew up in Portugal. I didn't even know if you had the Super Nintendo. And I was poor as well, so
right.
I definitely did not have the Super Nintendo myself. But from what I understand, the Super Nintendo was when
when they got good.
The console, the console market became a serious thing. When the market hockey sticked.
So I think a hockey stick is like an exponential curve. So there's not a place you can point to.
Right. But yeah. So what are your thoughts on Oculus Quest though?
So the big thing is, it's actually kind of scary from a game design standpoint because you're not restricted to one space anymore. If you want to make a really meaningful VR experience with Oculus Quest, you probably want to use the extraordinary power of being able to walk around your entire house.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, right? That opens a lot of, a lot of possibilities for, augment even for geolocation based apps. Like right now you have, with Pokemon Go, you have. People are looking at their phones essentially, they don't actually see anything in the real world. But if you're crazy enough to walk around the street with a virtual reality headset strapped to your face, with those 4 cameras mapping out the real,
Facebook is going to get so sued.
then you could really have an open world RPG sort of .
So I think this is going to be crazy. I think it's going to the potential for people who are having a completely different experience of the same place, being in the same place at the same time, and having to solve that problem and make that a pleasant experience.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting. And we were talking about communication and how it was going to be changed, hopefully, by this, right? If you have a long-distance relationship, imagine being able to step into VR and
just hang out at your partner's house or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. At your girlfriend's living room or whatever, and watch a movie together. That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been thinking about so when we were enthusiastically watching all the keynote speeches and listening to not our baseless speculation, but Oculus's baseless speculation.
From Mike Abrash. I think that's how I pronounce the name. Sorry if I butchered it.
Yeah.
My bad.
But so they were mentioning, and I think this is the right thing to talk about, a lot of sort of social aspects. They were talking a lot about what it's going to be like to be in VR with other people. And I agree. there's because what I think is crazy is we're in this point right now culturally where more and more people understand technology really well and are using it in really deep, life-affecting ways, and starting to ask themselves about how it makes them feel about the way they interact with people and so on. And one of the things that I'm sure everyone has experienced is how if you're texting somebody, much less if you're on Twitter or some kind of large-scale public text forum, the lack of body language can be really bad, basically. It can be super unpleasant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it sort of seems like we might be at this local minimum where technology was really good at connecting people, but really bad at connecting them in a way that felt good.
Right.
And now VR is going to start fixing that, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I truly believe that. But what I really like about the Quest, I mean, for me, it solves every problem I had with VR up until this point. I did not like
the setup process.
Yeah, well, I did not like the setup process. I did not like having those sensors that have to be stationary on a table or whatever. I hated the cords. I really hated the cords. And because we only had two sensors actually, and because we've always had only two sensors, the Tablecraft was designed for two sensors. We put a lot of the interactions in front of the player, and we avoided, at least up until now, having stuff going on the desk that's behind the player. Because when you turn around, it actually glitches because the hands stop communicating. The sensors can't see the hands essentially. Whereas now, the cameras are always going to be able to see the hands, I guess. So if you have true 6 degrees of freedom.
I don't know if the cameras will always see the hands, but at the very least, it won't be dependent on the direction you're facing.
Right. Yeah.
But any attentive Tablecraft fans will notice that there is in fact a table behind.
Yeah.
And that is because pretty much since it was first conceived, Raphael has been pushing to build the game, to not design the sort of current game, but to think about building the game with the assumption that eventually you'll be able to turn around.
Yeah, with the assumption that the hardware is going to catch up at some point.
Which I was not expecting to happen as quickly as it did. It was definitely
So we got the demo. The demo we got at GDC for Santa Cruz was this headset essentially.
Yeah.
And it was pretty all right. I remember thinking at the time that it was already superior to what I had experienced with the Rift. Superior, obviously not like graphics, not in terms of graphics or anything, but the experience felt better. I could turn around, walk around.
But because we were in a white cube of a room,
right.
I totally didn't appreciate the implication of being able to actually walk around in a real world space. That was something I not understood.
The demo also was not. The demo we tried wasn't a walk around kind of.
Yeah,
demo.
I mean they weren't trying to do anything AR. But but that aside, I'm sort of a little disappointed in myself for not having understood the actually amazing thing about having the inside out sensing. That I feel like Oculus has been consistently 2 steps ahead of my my thinking, at least in terms of what VR means. I've been pretty consistently surprised because I guess I still have the sort of old school science fiction understanding of what it means, and Oculus has a plan.
I love it. So yeah, I mean, everything about it, I love it. I read a little bit about the specs and stuff. Seems like it's going to have similar horsepower to a Xbox 360 or a PS3, which is totally fine because
I feel like a better way to think about it is maybe to think of it like a Nintendo console, because Nintendo consoles also have previous generation horsepower typically, but they use certain graphical styles and stuff to make that not felt.
Yeah, and they have a lot of other pros. The Switch, for instance, and I mean this is what John said. John Carmack, he did say that they were going to be, not necessarily competing with the PS4 or the Xbox One. They were going to be competing with the Switch in the sense that, obviously it's a little bit less powerful, but it's mobile, right? You can take it anywhere. So
Well, they're competing with both, right? Because they'll also come out with a new Rift at some point to compete with the PlayStation. But
Right.
Yes. To make clear how pumped we are about the Quest in particular, the Rift, the next Rift, I'm excited. Like 4K or whatever sounds fun. It sounds nice to have to be able to read the text in Tablecraft. That'll be good one day. But by comparison, the experience of like learning about the Quest's features and instantly being able to visualize, like look at our laptop computers and say, this is such an old machine. Like very soon we will look back on this with shame that we had to carry around this big, heavy system that didn't meaningfully, build a UI around the space we were in or whatever.
Tiny window into the,
oh my God.
tiny screen. Yeah, I agree. We gotta get our hands on an Oculus Quest. And on that note, we applied to Oculus Start. Actually, we applied a while ago, but we applied like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But they required us to submit a build, and I never felt like it was ready. And now we did submit. Like out of the blue, I replied to their email 6 months later after 6 months of radio silence.
Yeah, which is a bit like texting someone you met 6 months ago.
Right. I'm like, oh, by the way, here's the build. They're probably like, who is this guy? So yeah. Speaking of applying to Oculus Start, I had a backlog of things that I wanted to apply to, and Oculus Start was one of them. So a couple of other things were like awards and competitions, because part of the SBIR, and if you're just tuning in, the SBIR is essentially a government grant that we covered in the previous episode of the podcast, a government grant that provides funding for
research projects.
Innovative, risky sort of small business ventures. And we're going to be applying to that. More details later on in this podcast. But one of the things that they look for, one of the things that the SBIR looks for is credibility. And obviously the best way to, gain some credibility is to win some awards,
especially when we're so small.
We're two people, with the help of John and Fabiana. But we're a tiny team, and so some of the awards I've been applying to these past 2 weeks were like the Serious Games Challenge and Competition, which takes place here in Orlando, Florida. We applied as well to the Independent Games Festival,
which might be more popularly known as IGF.
Yeah, the IGF, which, the competition is rough there. We'll probably not get selected, but we applied as well we got a scholarship actually for the CAPI Awards, I call them. It's the Kids at Something Awards.
At Play?
Oh yeah, actually I think that's what it is.
It's just my best
Play. And then what's the last time? I don't know. Well, anyway, it's the CAPI Awards as I call it. We applied to that as well, and I noticed that a lot of the previous grant winners, for the SBIR from previous years, they got this award. So I think it's that's how I found it.
The sort of timeline of Rafa, writing a ridiculous number of award proposal or requests or whatever you call them, applications. There we go.
Right.
Is because this last award that we're about to talk about, the EdTech Awards, was recommended to us by Ed Metz, who is the
program manager.
For the SBIR, and so because we were recommended to go try for this award because it might be relevant to the grant, we then looked into all the other games that have received the grant and sort of scoured the awards that they had listed themselves receiving.
Exactly. And we applied to
anything
all
that was
those.
Appropriate to our project.
And that if they were open or whatnot, because some of them are still applications are not open right now.
Right.
They're not taking applications right now. But and so the last one, as Guillaume just said, that we applied to was the EdTech Awards. It cost us like $769, but we don't talk about that. And we're hoping. Let's hope we fingers crossed. We'll see. No, I think we can compete. I think we can compete in the majority of these awards, with the exception of obviously the Independent Games Festival, because I mean that one is huge.
Yeah, independent games includes 20-person studios.
Right.
In a meaningful way.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the sort of grant and education game type competitions that we're interacting with, these are also sometimes significantly sized companies.
Yeah.
But they're not directing all of their horsepower towards the one project. A lot of the people who are involved in these grants, the grant is something that they do as sort of experiments that individuals or small teams within the company can sort of lead, which is the goal, right? Because the goal is to have companies be encouraged to do risky side ventures that they might not otherwise consider financially viable.
Speaking of EdMets, it's now official. Like we are going to be one of the companies showcasing at the Ed Games Expo in DC.
Which is the one that Ed invited us to. Let's be clear, one Ed stands for education and the other one stands for Edward. This is not Ed's personal expo, but it is the one that he invited us to that we were really excited
Ironically,
about.
I think he was the one who started it. So
really?
So maybe
it's both names?
It's like a meme.
Oh, man, that's funny.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's like a meme, like not suspicious.
I'm sure if we tell him that joke, it'll be the first time he's ever heard it.
So that's on January 7th and January 8th. We're going to be in DC. There's going to be 20 plus schools there with 500 plus students and their teachers.
And that's kind of the thing we're most excited about in some ways, because kids playing Tablecraft has always been a great experience for us. We've always learned a lot. And it's we can talk a bit about one of the things we've been trying to do now is we want to do some small pilot studies to prepare for the SBIR. And that means we need to find classrooms of kids and educators to help us measure whether or not Tablecraft helps kids. And it's been surprisingly difficult because, for example, the most recent bureaucratic hurdle I've encountered is the fact that Oculus technically requires that you have to be 13 years of age or older to use the headset, because I believe, like, from the speculation I've read, so obviously it's lawyer-y butt covering, but from the speculation I've read, so it's true that there can be damage to vision of 8-year-olds and younger from doing anything that's classified as near work. So that's reading, using your smartphone, using a tablet, and also presumably using a headset, although it's possible actually.
But was there like a lot of research on that? Like, did you find white papers and stuff on that?
Yeah.
Conclusive evidence. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely the case that like smartphones are not good for kids' vision. For instance.
Okay. Interesting.
But like young kids. Right. And then and that's like 8 years old.
That's interesting though.
Sort of threshold
why? Okay, so
because your eyes are still like growing a lot. So like when I was really young, I had nearsighted vision, and I remember they gave me glasses and they told me your eyes are probably going to like shift to reflect the fact that you have glasses now. Which is not to say like the glasses damage my vision. I don't necessarily understand the
physics,
medicine or
biology.
But
I love how physics is my umbrella for everything real world related.
The point is to say that there is some speculation that very young children could suffer vision damage from extensive use of VR, like the kind of extensive use that you see when young kids get access to tablets. Which if anyone's ever seen a kid with a tablet, I'm talking extensive. But because Oculus has decided, and I think this is the speculation I believe is because Facebook has a 13 and younger.
The older you mean, or
13? Yeah, 13 and older. When kids are 12 and younger in the U.S., you have to like be more careful with their data. And so I believe that is the actual reason why Oculus does not quote unquote recommend the headset for kids age 12 and younger, which also means that if someone ever develops nearsightedness, they're not going to get sued.
Interesting. But that's. And so what did you? How did
you? So what I encountered was that schools are skittish about. Like if you ever went on a field trip when you were younger, you had to bring a form home to your parents, and that's all good. You want your parents to know where you're going.
Your parents are responsible for you.
But they also don't like sending parents those forms in the first place if they can avoid it. And they also the forms, in the same way that, a company can have you sign an EULA, but it could be unenforceable or whatever, the forms are not like a guaranteed legal protection. And schools are very concerned about legal protection.
Right.
And so the point of this entire rant is to say that it's been surprisingly difficult to get to work directly with schools in particular with sort of large numbers of students, whereas when we've been at conferences, kids come by with their parents, and we're interacting directly with the person who is legally responsible. But so basically, the point is to say that if we're going to get 500 students coming to a conference, and kids love Tablecraft. Like if kids are at an ed tech conference, they're going to come see Tablecraft.
As they have been so far, like in every other conference we've been to.
Yeah, because like blobs are fun, colors are nice, etc. And so I'm super excited because
I'm super excited.
We're gonna figure out the bureaucracy. We're gonna be able to run a study and so on. Yeah. But a study is not like a small pilot study is not really the volume that you want if you're really gonna figure out how kids at large feel about something.
Yeah. So on the second day of the conference, there's gonna be a stakeholder meeting, which, from what I understand, there are going to be representatives from 20 plus government programs there that support edtech and learning games. So
I mean, who knows? There could be
all
stuff
of
we've
these
never heard
super important people, presumably, or people with influence. Let's say, moving bureaucracy mountains, which is. I mean, it's hard. They're going to be there, and we're going to be able to talk to them. There's actually going to be a dinner on that last day. A group dinner with all of us, presumably.
The other thing I want to mention though is moving bureaucracy mountains is good, of course. But the last time we met someone like this, which was at Metz, he also just knew a lot about what else was out there in the world that could help us, not just get grants and so on, but get our name out there, get feedback, do research and so on.
And so anyway, I learned that we're also eligible to apply for the NSF grant and as well as the IES grant. So out of nowhere, we have double the chances, quote unquote, of actually attaining one of these grants, which would be wonderful. It would obviously fund the further development of Tablecraft and other projects that we might want to work on in the future. And this is something that Edward Metz told us to do. He told us for sure apply to both of these to improve your chances, basically.
That's why I'm so pumped to go to the Ed Games Expo. Is if we can meet 20 more Edward Metzes and they know about 20 more
grants. Oh man!
So the way the distribution of labor recently has been that these grants. One woman literally said she thinks it takes 450 person hours of work to apply to one of these grants. And so at that point, that means it's easily Raphael's full-time job plus 50% of my job. And so recently, for example, this past week, you spent for 3 straight days. You spent every waking moment watching videos,
workshops
of people talking about
and reading documentation on
there was grant reviewers, people who had gotten grants, people who it's business school professors, but and also on top of that, I also had to spend I think the first 2 to 3 days out of the week not coding, but actually also reading paperwork and working on bureaucracy because there was so much. There's so much involved in knowing that making sure you don't break the law somehow or break some small rule. Because for instance, we have to have black on white 12-point font application, etc.
The rules
there's
are very
a lot
strict.
Of that kind of thing.
The rules are very strict.
But also knowing about why these grants are being given out so that when we are applying and when we're designing our project and our company, we are actually tailoring it to what the people who we want to give us money actually want to get out of that money. We need to make sure we actually have a plan to execute on something these people want.
Yeah, exactly. And in the long term, this is important because it's going to fund our creative freedom, right? It would probably be possible for Tablecraft to sort of get acquired by some other company or for us to, merge with someone else, but then you lose creative freedom like that. But if we actually get a grant, in the long term, we're going to be able to essential. Make educational games great again.
Well, perhaps we should use a different metaphor.
Yeah, we should use a different slogan. Actually, you were just yesterday you brought up an article on that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So what I just saw on a sort of game fan community.
Right.
There was an article about the story of a company called The Learning Company that made Reader Rabbit and a bunch of other famous educational games. And I was very interested to notice that the game fans who were commenting on this article were all talking about how not just they missed these old games that they were nostalgic for from when they were kids, but also how they felt like there was very much a sentiment of like, man, I don't understand why education games aren't as good as other games these days. They used to be, and sort of we agree.
Right, but did they explain? I didn't read the article yet. Did they explain why it is that
the company's gone, or?
Yeah, well, first of all, yes. Why is the company gone?
Like they were bought and then seriously mismanaged, which sort of goes to refer to the other thing we just talked about.
This is why we need an SBIR.
Yeah.
And so why are educational games no fun anymore? Like, do you think it's just because the production values went up so much that?
So there's anybody who plays games has probably heard this idea that games are too expensive to make nowadays, and so it's really hard to innovate because the risk is so high. Because making a Call of Duty requires so many man hours of just tweaking the dust to look right after the
women hours
footsteps.
Well.
Yeah, no, sorry. And the just when you look at one of these screenshots, you think, yeah, it looks kind of like real life. So I guess that you just sort of like made a thing like real life. But what you don't appreciate is that real life is full of like obnoxious little details that take a super long time. They have to be hand placed and so on. And so I think that's definitely a factor. But I think that I also got the impression that people felt like there was sort of like a lack of a cultural force behind really high quality education games, and that's part of why it's been like that. I feel like EdMet's talking about getting really, really pumped about the quality of the SBIR applicants going up extraordinarily every year, and people like us coming in from the game industry who sort of are knowledgeable about making things that are good experiences, but relatively new to the education context. I get the impression from at least from the ed people that we've talked to, ed people being ed. I feel like there's a lot of cultural momentum actually right now behind education games, and I feel like this sort of SBIR economy that we're joining just now is actually accelerating a lot and is growing into. At a minimum, right? If there were shell games and filament games who were producing high quality experiences with this grant, now there will also be Tablecraft and Not Suspicious, right? Right. But presumably there will be several others.
Yeah, I think there are already, but we just haven't found them yet. I have yet to look into all those products.
Title Online that we saw was really interesting.
Yeah, that one looks pretty nice. I also liked. I like the pitch for Fate and Fortune.
Right. Yes. Let's talk about that video that you saw because you were really into it.
Yeah. So what I really liked about Fate and Fortune. So when you apply to the SBIR, you need to put together. Yeah, you need to put together a 4-minute sort of pitch video that is sent to the SBIR with your application. I think we're still going through all this paperwork to figure out exactly what are the deliverables. But that's besides the point. The point is, I watched the video for this.
We watched the video for all of the videos.
Yeah, we watched a lot. Yeah, exactly. We watched a lot of videos, but one that really stuck in my mind was Fate and Fortune. The game wasn't even like.
Yeah, it didn't have a lot of production values.
Yeah, it didn't have a lot of production values, but I really liked how they put together that video. So it starts with a. It starts on this boat or like on this ship. And with this pirate tune, I think, in the background or whatever, and you start thinking, oh, okay, so this is like a game about history or whatever.
You're gonna go on a historical.
Yeah, you're gonna go on an historical mission. Like you're gonna like go to India or you're gonna go whatever. And then out of nowhere, it cuts to this guy who I think was the CEO of the company, or at least like the principal investigator behind this project, and he's like So algebra is the
most failed or something like that.
Yeah, the most failed subject.
Yeah. It's a hard cut. It's all like Pirate Adventure, and then someone telling you about how algebra is too hard.
Yeah. and then you're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Like this is.
No, it's a good head fake.
It was a really good head fake.
And it gives you this. What was good about this video is it gave you the experience that you're hoping for the kids to have, right? You're hoping for the kids to have this experience where they're like, they feel immersed and they're pumped about the sort of environment that they're in, and then also like, oh, wait, this is solving a problem I actually care about.
The video was just really good.
Yeah. And that's one thing we have to think about because Tablecraft as a product, one of the things we've been thinking about recently is how Tablecraft is not quite game and a little more experience in some ways. Tablecraft is like a cool lab to be in.
Yeah,
it's very self-driven.
Yeah.
And because of the lack of, the little robot assistant character tells you about the things you can do, but doesn't tell you about what you should do.
Right.
And kids like that, as far as we can tell, but it's sort of hard to express why that works as a project that gets people interested in this specific subject of chemistry and radioactivity and all the other stuff that we're talking about in the game. And so I think one of the ways we can think about this video that we liked is, well, they sort of gave the audience the experience of being in the environment that they wanted the kids to feel like they were in, and then once you were in that environment, then they started to reveal what you could learn from being in that environment.
Right. Absolutely.
So in the case of Tablecraft, you're in a weird treehouse with a bunch of blobs.
I was corresponding with a PhD researcher from South Africa. He actually reached out to us on Discord. He joined our Discord and he reached out to us to let us know that he wanted to carry out a study using either Tablecraft or any other game that we knew about. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I told him we'll make Tablecraft available if you want to carry out a study. And the study you wanted to carry out was on the effectiveness of VR in learning. He signed me up for these research software or whatever it is. Called Mendeley that I didn't know. I'm sure this is like the Google or something and for like researchers, and I sound like an idiot
I think
now.
that's JSTOR.
Okay, never heard of that one either. But yeah, I signed up for Mendeley, and he shared 3 white papers with me, 3 studies. So that's what I'm going to be doing next week. I'm going to be reading 3 white papers. Yeah, plus 2 other ones that we found.
Yeah. I found a white paper that I believe to be the first incidence of testing VR in education, which is, I think, a woman who is measuring whether chemistry game.
Right. But how old are we?
I'm talking 1996, I think. A chemistry game in VR, which I guess is like the time of the Virtual Boy. I don't know what kind of hardware they're using.
Right.
But a lot of the reason we were reading this was actually to try to figure out study methodology. Yeah. Because we got to do research. If we're going to have the government give us money in order to measure whether this education game works, we need to be able to test whether it works. And so we need to learn about how you do a good study of whether students are learning.
Yeah. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to be on the paper. Well, I guess so. Basically, what I was going to say is I don't know if I'm going to be able to be listed as in any meaningful capacity on the application for the NSF, because the way that things work with Fulbright, which is the agency that's sponsoring my visa in the United States, I need to apply for. I can work. I can actually. So this is the clarification I wanted to do with regards to what I said in the previous episode of this podcast, which is that I can actually work in the United States. However, I cannot work for my own company. It's tricky. Unless, and this is something that I found out just this past week, and it was actually pretty good news. If Guillaume started this company called Not Suspicious LLC, and he owns the company, because if I also owned it, there could be problems with my visa, and most importantly, there could be problems with the SBIR, right? Because right now we're only 2 co-founders, therefore it should be 50-50, and it needs to be majority owned so that you can apply for the SBIR. But what I learned was that if Guillaume manages to get any kind of investment for his Not Suspicious company, one, is going to be able to hire me as like CEO or COO or whatever for up to 16 months at Not Suspicious LLC. And on top of that, I'm going to be able to, get my equity, my part of the equity as well, because then, assuming we get investment from like a U.S. Firm or a U.S. Angel investor or whatever, then
it's at least 51%.
Yeah, it would be at least 51%, and that would be perfect. Yeah, but I think that was all I wanted to cover with regards to SBIR and all these crazy acronyms.
Grant
Talks, yeah.
This is my morning. Every morning I wake up, I get to hear more about grants.
And now,
just been watching videos in bed.
Finally, I think it's time we jump into
the best part
of this podcast, which is the actual development.
Game Talks.
Yeah, which is Game Talks, which is the actual development of Tablecraft.
Yeah.
So I suppose you can start with the continuing of the Isotope work.
So last time, we mentioned. Well, it was mostly just sort of bug fixing and making sure it all worked well, right?
Right.
We
made it so that now when you scan an element, it doesn't immediately start having radioactive.
Right. Yeah. It was sort of quality of life stuff. I spent much of much of my work time from the week after we did the podcast was actually making sure that the features I had quote unquote implemented by podcast time actually, worked in a way that was easy to interact with as a person and didn't have any weird situations where you would be wanting to do something and you couldn't because the element you were holding was radioactive and it would jump away or something. But then this past week was when I got to work on a lot of things that were sort of exciting new features for me at least. It was, in a way, it's the least exciting, but in a way, it's sort of one of the more challenging things I've done for Tablecraft, which is I rebuilt the entire backend behind the sort of periodic table that's on the screen. Yeah. And the reason that's important is because we added these isotopes, but if you can't figure out, like if you want to be able to unlock different isotopes and understand what it means for something to be an isotope and just generally interact with this system in any way that's beyond just having cubes bounce around in a lab, then you need some way to understand that information. And so we put it on the periodic table because then you can like click on an element and then it'll bring up a sort of zoomed in explanation that tells you about the isotopes of the element that exist in Tablecraft.
Exactly.
And which ones you have unlocked and so on. So that's sort of that's education and communication and so on. But it's also sort of gameplay because it means that now you can have this sort of two-tiered unlocking system where you can try to just unlock all the elements, or you can try to unlock all the isotopes of all the elements.
Exactly.
Which is, having 100%ing is always.
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's definitely. If you're a completionist, there's going to be a lot more for you to unlock.
To complete.
Yeah, to complete basically. Yeah.
So that was reasonably fun work for me because. So I don't have really a computer science background. This is a very classic task. It was I had to make a sort of two-dimensional interface, approximately, right? Obviously, you can point at it with a 3D pointer thing in the game, and that had caused its own problems. But I built this sort of object-oriented structure where I sort of built an abstract layer that could create arbitrary icons by having arbitrary looks that were attached to arbitrary sort of, hitboxes for whether or not the laser was pointing at that thing. And that way I could do sort of more sophisticated things in terms of moving things around on the table. The first thing that I've done so far was I made it so that if you highlight over an element, the group that element is associated with will come out with it. One thing I found is a lot of the time the group that is highlighted is the sort of the transition metals, because it's just like a big chunk in the middle.
Yeah, the yellow ones, yeah.
But it looks fine. It looks good when you're moving the thing around. Although we've been talking about whether from a just game design standpoint we actually want this feature, even though it looks and feels good, because it also sort of spoils the player on which
it has been
they
growing.
might be unlocking.
It has been growing on me lately. I think you polished it in a way that made it a lot more subtle than it was. But when we saw the first iteration, we were discussing whether it would basically spoil because right now when you look at the periodic table and you see a lot of elements locked, you don't know what group they belong to, and maybe the hypothesis was that maybe as a player, there's some value in not knowing and then figuring out like, oh, wow, I didn't know there were so many yellows or whatever. So many yellow, because obviously as a player, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, I didn't know there were so many transition metals. You're going to be like, I didn't know there were so many yellows. But now, based on this current functionality, when you hover over the first yellow, any yellow, the entire group of yellows,
which includes locked yellows,
which includes locked yellows, comes forward, and therefore it kind of quote unquote spoils the mystery basically.
But on the other hand, it feels real good.
Yeah. And it, there's some educational value in that as well.
We want to be careful though, because we want the periodic table to first and foremost not feel like a classic educational periodic table that's here to tell you about those properties. We want it to feel like a list of achievements to get in a game.
Exactly, and so that's why these might sound very unimportant, but it's actually very important to us because it establishes the tone, right? So that's the logic behind that. But we're keeping this functionality for now, and we'll see how it pans out basically.
Yeah. So fortunately, because I'm starting to wrap up building this backend with the arbitrary icons and so on that I can manipulate indirectly, it's going to be easier to add little polish elements like that going forward. And so maybe what will happen is we will end up polishing so much about how the periodic table moves and feels that it will feel good without having to have this feature that may or may not align with the design goals of the game. Yeah. The one other sort of little task that I did programmatically that I'm pretty pumped about is So Rafa has been asking for a long time for the ability to make a carbon mega fruit, which I've always pictured as like a big blue pineapple. And what he means by that is the way we wrote the algorithm a long time ago to test whether or not you had created a correct recipe to craft something with in the converter machine.
What do we call the converter machine, which is the machine that extracts elements from objects and puts back elements together into objects.
So when you're putting elements together into objects, you need to go through the list of possible objects to make and what they are made of, and pick the one that is, you have to pick according to a number of criteria. You want to pick the biggest one in terms of the number of elements it takes. You want to pick, based on the most recent element that was added and so on. But the old algorithm couldn't. It didn't work if you had a recipe that had 2 carbons in it, for instance.
Yeah.
Which, there's a classic recipe that everyone keeps trying to make in our game, which is hydrogen and 2 oxygens to make water. And you've not been able to make water in Tablecraft, or ice as we'll probably do, up until recently, because that algorithm was.
Well, you're still not going to be able to make water, but you're definitely going to be able to make ice cubes. Because we're definitely not touching liquids.
My God. Yeah. After what Sabrina told us about how hard it was to work with liquids in Hololab Champions.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously water is the classic example, but there's also other gameplay possibilities. Like for instance, if we want to be able to craft like a battery, but if I want to, obviously this is very gamified, but if I want to craft like a small battery and then a medium battery and then a big battery, I want to be able to progressively have more and more cubes that craft bigger and bigger. Craftables, essentially.
Thus making it possible for us to have to make even more craftables to use all the elements. Great.
Yeah. And speaking of more craftables, that's what Fabiana is working on right now.
And furniture, right?
In furniture. Fabiana has also been working on testing furniture on the lab. None of these things that you're seeing on screen are the new furniture that Fabiana is working on. I have not had time to get an engine and actually place it and so on and so forth. I did have time earlier in the week, or like last week or something, to put in sort of a new desk.
A slightly modified desk.
A slightly modified desk. So on the last episode we introduced Fabiana. She's working with us. She's a 3D artist. She's working part-time, not full-time, like I said last time, part-time. And the other person that's working with us, the other 3D artist that's working with us part-time as well, for at least like one or 2 days of the week, is John Ruiz. So John Ruiz is a friend of ours who came up with the treehouse idea.
Yeah.
Because I remember telling him that I was looking for a more playful tone, And one day he just randomly comes up to me and he's like, so what if the lab was a tree house? and then like 6 months later we did it. No. Well, and it's not even done.
Although it has already significantly improved how it feels to be in the lab.
Absolutely.
But anyway, we came to John with another game design problem for him to solve for us.
So one of the things, when we were at all of these conferences, and this is not the problem that he was trying to solve, but when we were at all of these conferences, we noticed that sometimes kids were either too short or adults were either too tall.
Oh, yeah, because I was thinking of the problem where it was hard to see cubes and blobs that were behind the table. So the table had these big old legs.
Let's explain that problem
that were in the way, and it was hard to see through them, and you couldn't grab things through them.
Right.
And so you'd have to duck into a strange sort of angle in order to reach around and so on, and it was very annoying.
Exactly. And that was the problem we brought to John.
Yeah.
So when John, in the process of looking at references for the treehouse and for the furniture and so on, I sent John a reference. A couple of hours later, he's like, so I modeled this like floating desk. You want to check it out? And I immediately was like, well, this solves a lot of problems. Yeah. This solves obviously the problem of, the legs being in the way. Because one of the things I had tried before was making the table made out of glass. But I didn't like that. It was just confusing in a way. Because, when you're working on a table, you don't want to be looking at what's underneath the table. But you do want to be able to look underneath the table and not have your view being
the other reason not to do glass, of course, is that it's in VR. It's kind of cool when people have to duck.
Yeah, exactly.
There's value in having to duck down because it gets you sort of personally invested in what you're up to and it makes you feel more immersed.
Exactly. And so when John made this floating table, the first ideas we had was, let's put handles on it. Maybe players can move the table up and down. Like maybe they can get the table out of the way,
or rotate, because at the time we did not yet know that the Oculus Quest was going to solve this problem for us so soon.
At the time, Oculus Quest was not a thing. So we're probably going to do that. I remember a couple of months ago toying around with I think after Games Exchange, toying around with the idea of having some sort of levers on the table that would allow like some sort of trap door to open on the floor that would like sort of take the table under the floor so that you could have the whole floor for yourself and be able to play with the blobs or do whatever you want. But that was not an elegant design solution. Now, what John came up with is very elegant because you can just lift the table up. It goes above your head or whatever, and then obviously you're going to be able to grab it with like the distance grab telekinesis mechanic or whatever.
So to be clear, we have not executed on this yet.
Yeah.
We're going to have to test it and see if we can actually make it work well because, having a lot of physics objects on top of the table, maybe it'll be a mess and we'll have to figure something out. But the other thing I want to mention that was good about this idea was also because it tied into, so when Fabiano was first sort of prototyping and we were first discussing, like, what's this treehouse lab like? We talked about having sort of furniture that is, some furniture is this sort of science fiction stuff that the professor made themselves.
Right.
And some furniture is this, antique, shoddily put together, treehouse style friendly furniture. And I like the idea of the table being something between the two in the sense that it's currently sort of functionally like a school picnic table, but with cool jet hovering tech.
The looks of the table are still not final. Yeah. But the game design value that we got out of this idea was very significant. So I spent a lot of time on that, like putting it in engine, trying a bunch of different.
You were so pumped.
Yeah, I was super pumped about that because it solved so many game design problems that we had. The other thing I did because of that, so with this new table, we thought it would be a cool idea to make it so that the table could react to physics, like when a blob bumps into it, or when anything bumps into it.
I spent so much time.
Yeah, the table would react with physics. And so,
in order to make this inspired idea to have the thing right in front of the player just be able to bounce around all over the place in a completely uncontrolled fashion.
Yeah, make the player motion sick.
You basically had to go through and get all these very sort of detailed, lots of little nubbins on the machines.
Yeah, it took me like a full day to...
that is an overstatement. Well, it was like 2 hours.
No. It was more than 2 hours.
See, I wasn't paying close attention to the time passing because I was busy spending my time on making the table bounce around and getting sick.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason I got sick was because the way motion sickness works in VR is basically your eyes use your peripheral vision to detect whether you're moving.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why if you've ever used Google Earth VR and you're flying around, it sort of narrows into a small circle in front of you. And that's because the peripheral vision is how your eye detects that you're in motion. And then when that doesn't match your eye knowing from your inner ear, which is this sort of accelerometer like exists in your phone, when your brain understands that there's a mismatch between what your peripheral vision sees and what your inner ear sees, it thinks you might be poisoned, and that's why your inner ear is not working.
Right.
And so that's why you feel a desire to vomit when that happens. And so
Yeah.
the problem with having the table move in the way that I was testing, which is very physics-driven rather than something that we controlled specifically from code.
Even though you also tried the other approach.
Yeah, I mean, we tried a little of both, but it was still interacting with the physics objects and so on. Yeah. The problem with having it move in a way, because the other thing we were trying to do was just make it look like it was like hovering, and it was essentially the equivalent of saying, well, let's have the whole lab like bounce around like we're on a ship or something.
Bad idea, by the way. Just saying, bad idea.
So basically it took us a super long time.
Yeah.
It was like one day. It wasn't that big a deal.
Yeah, it was literally one day. Yeah, we spent the whole day on that. A whole day from 10 a.m. to like 7 p.m.
And then when we were still nauseous by the end, we gave up and we decided that maybe this is a very good jet table and it just stays still.
Yeah, that covers most of what we've done. The other kind of small thing we did was you removed the physics from the Bohr model, which.
Yeah, and that was all because we're concerned about performance, and now we're extra concerned about performance because the Oculus Quest is not as powerful as our laptops.
Yeah. It seems as though the standards are going to be much tougher to get on, to develop for Oculus Quest, which is fine. Like I'm okay.
Yeah,
with that.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I mean I think that covers everything that we did for these past 2 weeks. Now for the following weeks, what are we going to be working on? Well, I am probably going to be looking more into the SBIR documentation.
Mm-hmm. As you have been.
As I have been. Well, I do want to get an engine. I don't feel as productive when I'm not an engine.
Getting an engine is really important for your mental health.
Yeah. I do want to get an engine and implement some stuff or at least bring some of the art that the artists are doing.
This is one of the things that's been fortunate actually is our artists are busy people.
Yeah.
They can't give us 100% of their time, but as a result, it also means because working, with 3D artists, they can just churn out content, and then you need to test it in Engine and you need to see if it looks good and so on, and that takes time on our part too. So it's actually been sort of a nice balance where the amount of time that they have available is also about the amount of time that we could plausibly give over to supporting their work.
Exactly. So I mean, I don't know. I will be looking into that kind of stuff. I'll be following up on research and all that stuff that we need for the SBIR.
Yeah, you might have to back me up on.
I don't know. With regards to features, what could I promise?
So my highest priority is going to be just cleaning up and making sure the periodic table stuff I worked on last week is stable and as fully featured and polished as it can be. So that's probably going to take another couple of days. Mm-hmm. But then after that, I was thinking I would either work on making new hands that work I Expect You to Die style. Mm-hmm. And that's the telekinesis that we've talked about in the past, I think. Or I could work on implementing some sort of basic gameplay logic to having the blobs want things with speech bubbles.
I think we might want, so one of those two. We don't know. Yeah. we're gonna discuss it.
The hands is a big task, so because the hands also then leads into the sort of big thing that we've been building up to with all the art and all the things that we've been working on, which is customizing the lab. Yeah,
being able to move furniture around, place it wherever we want, and so on and so forth. There's also, maybe Fabiana is going to do some animations for our for the robot.
Yeah, that would be nice.
We might be looking into that. Maybe expressions for the blobs, as in we might want to have several expressions, like for when they poop or for when they for when they're hungry.
What does a pooping expression look like?
The pooping expression is like 2 X's on the ice. It's like they're like struggling. Basically.
Right, that makes sense. Oh man, and then there could be like a wind up. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
Yeah, so I believe this wraps up episode 2 of Lunch with the Devs.
At this rate, the 10th episode will be an entire year long.
Yeah. And
we hockey sticked. we did it.
I hope that was entertaining and
or at least maybe you're asleep now.
Yeah, exactly. And see you next time. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks you so much. We've been notsuspicious.biz. Or Not Suspicious LLC.
Not Suspicious.
Email me at guillaume@notsuspicious.biz. Email Raphael at raphael@notsuspicious.biz.
Yep. And that's it. Not Suspicious signing out.